I don't see any evidence of this, but I continue to watch Larry Johnson. He's one of the few people who I would watch if I have a very little time during the day and I want to watch someone. He's one of the people who I want to watch, and of course, the same is true with Pepe. And for me, they're extremely credible. And I cannot say that what that Pakistani person uh, claimed is incorrect because I'm not in the know. And if it's not correct, it doesn't reflect upon either Larry Johnson or Pepe Escobar.
Yeah, but we know there's serious discussions in Iran about NPT. What is the meaning of NPT? If we are attacked, if the Bushehr nuclear power plant is attacked, and the enemy doesn't consider any sort of, limits for what they
Yes,
do.
yes, but just one thing, and I know you know this, and I know much of your audience knows this, but if Iran leaves the NPT, it is as leverage. It is to punish the United States and the West. It doesn't mean that Iran will develop a nuclear weapon. It will make it more difficult for them to understand Iran's nuclear program. But it doesn't mean Iran. I mean, someone recently, I think it was like Channel 4 News or someone said, I think it was them a couple of weeks ago. They said, why did Iran produce enriched uranium at 60%? I said, well, you have to remember the history. There's a context to this. Iran signed a nuclear deal in 2015. It gave many concessions. The Americans under Obama cheated Iran. Under Trump, they tore up the deal. For 2 years, Iran continued to abide by its commitments while it was under maximum pressure sanctions in full violation of the deal. The Europeans and the Americans were all imposing maximum pressure sanctions. And so after New Year, 2 years, the Iranians renewed their nuclear program. And in order to put pressure on the West to come back to the negotiating table, what did they do? They increased uh, the enrichment, the percentage, the degree to which uranium is enriched to 60%. So it was for leverage. It was to force them to come back to the negotiating table and to get concessions. When the other side has sanctioned you, what do you put on the table to force them to remove sanctions? You put something on the table. One of the things that Iran put on the table is enrichment of uranium at 60%. So if Iran leaves the NPT, doesn't mean Iran wants to build a nuclear weapon, but it wants to make life more difficult for the West. So the smart thing for the West to do is to look, accept the fact that, accept what Robert Kagan, and you told me about his interview a couple of days ago, which you promised to send me a link after the show. I haven't seen it, but I did read his article in the Atlantic, where in the monthly, where he said the United States lost, accept defeat, you know, accept Iran, going back to the book Going to Tehran by the Leverets, which I talk about a lot, and then uh, you can normalize. You can have a different situation. Is that going to happen? No, of course not. And not with this US regime and not with these current elites. But the world changes. Look at Iran and the Soviet Union. We had terrible relations. In their rallies, the Iranians would chant death to America and death to the Soviet Union. And of course, it's not literal. No one should take it literally. Uh, they're referring to the empire and imperialism. It's just like saying he bit the dust doesn't mean he ate the dirt. But in any case, they used to say the same for the Soviet Union. And then after the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan and their policies changed, people no longer chanted that in their rallies. And of course, later the Soviet Union collapsed, and relations with Russia today are infinitely better than back then. So it's not as if this hostility towards Iran's tormentors will be forever. If those tormentors are gone and decent people replace them, you can have the sort of relations between Iran and the United States as we have today between Iran and Russia and Iran and China. That's a hypothetical. We're nowhere close to that.
I think one of the points that General Rezai in his interview on CNN said is that the first step would be $24 billion of Iranian frozen assets for Iranians if they want to start to show some sort of move that Iran gets the sign that the United States is serious to start with, to start the negotiation, to start some sort of, deal, they have to start with the Iranian frozen assets, which we know this is the Iranian assets, by the way. It's not the United
Of
States
course.
asset. It's we know that the Iranian delegation, the head of the Iranian parliament, together with the foreign minister and the head of Central Bank of Iran, they went to Qatar, which was part of this frozen Iranian asset. What do we know about that so far?
Well, the issue, Nima, is clear. The Iranians are saying, we don't trust you. You're liars. And they are. We saw that in the JCPOA. Obama, who's no better than Trump. Just Trump is more crude and disgusting in his sinister behavior. Obama is more sophisticated, more hypocritical. But he too cheated Iran. At every step of the way, he cheated Iran. And all our dealings with the regime in Washington, the United States lied to you always, always, from the beginning of the revolution till now. So the Iranians this time round are saying, look, we have the Strait of Hormuz. We won the war. There's nothing you can do about it. You want a deal, you first have to carry out your obligations. Show us that you're serious, and we'll carry out our obligations. It's our money. Hand it over. If you don't hand it over, there's no deal. You want a deal? First, stop killing Lebanese children and get out of the country. You want a deal? Show us. But Iran is not going to say, okay, let's sign up and we'll do this, and then you promise to give us the money, you promise to stop killing kids in Lebanon. Of course they won't do that. They'll wait for Iran to carry out their obligations, and as usual, they'll continue killing kids. And Western media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, all of them will pretend that this is a very complicated situation in Lebanon, and it's very difficult to figure out who's to blame. Killing tens of thousands of kids in Gaza, just like it was difficult to determine who's to blame and all that in the West for Western media. So Iran knows that history will repeat itself if they don't negotiate differently this time around. So the Iranians have learned from their mistakes in dealing with the West and saying that, we always carry out our obligations. You're the ones who don't carry out your obligations. You want to deal with Iran? Show us you're serious. If you're serious, we promise you the Strait of Hormuz will be open. And we all know that Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz because everyone knows Iran carries out its obligations. Everyone knows it. The only nutcases like the Zionists in the United States. What's that guy's name? Levin, or what was his name? The crude Zionists, or Pompeo and these people.
Lindsey Graham?
No. Yeah, well, Lindsey Graham. Yeah, they say these are liars. They're they can say whatever nonsense they want. But whenever Iran had an agreement, Iran carried out its obligations. Too much. Iran did too much. Too much. I mean, after the U.S. Trump tore up the deal, and the Europeans effectively carried out Trump's orders and imposed maximum pressure sanctions, Iran effectively waited 2 years. I wouldn't have done that. Maybe they did the right thing, but I wouldn't have waited 2 years. But that just shows that the problem never lied in Tehran. The problem was never in Tehran. So this time around, the Iranians are saying, you have to show us goodwill. It's our money. You have to hand over our money, and yes, we'll open up the Strait of Hormuz to those ships that belong to those countries that help kill our kids.
Considering the two fronts, one of them between Iran and the United States in the Persian Gulf, and the other between Israel and Lebanon, which one is more difficult to, for the United States to agree on? The Iranian demands between Israel and Hezbollah, or the demands in the Persian Gulf with the case of the Strait of Hormuz? Which one is more difficult in your understanding?
No doubt, Lebanon. No doubt, Lebanon. Because that's what Netanyahu. I mean, we had a ceasefire after the war. Before we went to Islamabad, they agreed that there would be a ceasefire and that the ships would go through the Strait. A large number of ships would go through the Strait of Hormuz, and that there was to be a ceasefire in Lebanon. And then Netanyahu carpet bombed Lebanon. And Trump then said, "Oh well, Lebanon is not a part of the ceasefire." And the Pakistanis said, "Well, of course they are. You agreed on this." And so Trump was willing to, I guess, at least up to that point, to carry out other obligations, but not with regards to Lebanon. He wanted to allow the Israelis to kill kids, as they do. They're good at it. So the Iranians said no. So I think the fact that Zionists like killing kids is a big problem.
Yeah. We've heard Yemen saying that they're prepared if they attack Dahiya, we're going to be part of the response. It's not going to be just Iran.
Nima, the axis of resistance is going to be very different in the next war than it was in the 39-day war. It will be very different.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
Thank you for having me, Nima. It's always a great pleasure.